Hey guys, Shalon here. Welcome to the Bin Zone. On today's video, we're talking about the latest Netflix movie, The Kitchen, starring Kano, aka Sully, for all you Top Boy fans out there. And this movie is Daniel Kaluuya's directorial debut. Yes, Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out is the director behind this movie, well, co-director, along with Kimye Tavares, I believe. But without further ado, let's dive into this movie because there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of symbolism and deeper meanings beyond the sci-fi aesthetics of this movie. And this movie takes place in the possible near future, a dystopian future in which we find ourselves in the center of London. And in this dystopian setting of London, where social housing has vanished and the remaining residents struggle to survive, The Kitchen is a community clinging to hope. The Kitchen itself is former public housing, and the residents have nowhere else to go, even though the government wants to push them out of it and gentrify the area. We know how that goes because that is a social commentary on exactly what's happening now. And this movie shows that as we progress as a society, the divide between the haves and the have-nots grow even more. So even in a more sophisticated and futuristic society, these class divides show us how little regard we have for people deemed the lower class citizens. And this kitchen is essentially the futuristic hood. And the setting of this movie is very cyberpunk-ish in its aesthetics and also in its themes, because in this society, we're following our main character, Izi, aka Sully, and he's a character who's conflicted. He lives in the kitchen, but he works in a gentrified funeral home in which they take the remains of people. So instead of burying them, they end up cremating the bodies and infusing it in the soil of whatever plant that person chooses. And that person can forever feed that soil, which is a cool, environmentally friendly way of saving the earth while planting more trees. But also, you see the distinction between the kitchen where Izzy lives and the funeral home where he works. The kitchen, while it doesn't have water half the time, everyone has to go to one block to share one shower. The water has been shut off and all other utilities have been shut off. Despite all that, the kitchen is full of life. You hear the voice of Lord Kitchener every morning, waking up the residents, sharing in their joy, their grief. You see how they warn each other when the cops are coming to try to forcefully evacuate them, which we will talk about later in the video because that is a very poignant thing that we have to discuss. So you see the vibrancy in the life of it all. And when Izzy goes to work, you see how soulless, even though it's a funeral home, it's soulless. There's no life. It's not vibrant. It's mechanical. For it being an environmentally cautious agency, it's extremely sterile and lifeless in that place. And it shows you the dichotomy and the disconnect of class society. You have the gentrified areas. You see how they're nicer looking, they're well presented, but there's no life, there's no soul. And then you have the kitchen, vibrant, colorful, music blasting, and even though they have very little, they're so full of life. And it's while Izzy's at work, he notices that a former friend of his has died and she is putting her body in the soil. And when he goes to visit her fertilizing ceremony, he notices a young boy about 13 years of age. He was raised by his mother without ever knowing his father. And we, the audience, can already tell where this is going. So through dialogue and interaction, it is heavily implied that Izzy is Benji's father. And now we have a whole new dynamic in this dystopian future to look at. Because now we're looking at fatherhood, we're looking at class divide, and all this is through the lens of a black man. And now we see how the cycle of systemic racism and economic inequality leads to broken households, because as Benji is trying to get closer to his father, Izzy is not opening up. Izzy doesn't really know how to open up. And because Izzy doesn't know how to open up and how to be there for his son and be there for Benji after Benji lost his mother, Benji ends up walking around the kitchen, and it's here he meets Staples, a local gang leader. But what this movie does really well is while Staples is a local gang leader, it's showing the more positive sides of why gangs are formed in the first place, because it is about survival. In the kitchen, they have no resources. They stop allowing food to be delivered. They have no utilities, so they have to make do for themselves. So Staples and his gang, they go out and they rob and steal. They take resources to bring back to the kitchen so that they can survive. Not because they want to, but ultimately because they have to, because otherwise they will die, they will perish. And it's that influence that we're seeing, and Benji goes with that crowd. We as the audience already know what a gang is and why they move the way they do, but Benji, having never been here, having no father figure to show him the ropes, he gets wrapped up in there. And while they're being nice to him and they don't have any malicious intent, it's all about protecting him because he doesn't have anybody. Izzy realizes that if he's not in this boy's life, he's gonna end up like those boys. He's gonna end up in a gang. So he tries to pull Benji away from the gang while not pulling him closer. This movie, while bright, vibrant, and futuristic, at its core, it is heartwarming, it is touching, it is a sad story of a boy in search of love, in search for family, and a father unable to give it, doesn't know what it looks like because he never had it. Izzy's parents were not there for him. He had to raise himself. So he feels as though Benji doesn't need him. Benji should be able to raise himself because he did it. It's a cycle that will keep repeating itself until someone decides to break it. And Izzy's idea of breaking the cycle is just moving away from the kitchen, getting out the hood. Most people think that once you leave the hood, you leave your problems behind. But those problems will follow you unless you actively decide to make that change. That would require a lot of self-reflection and time. And in order to get that, you would need to have some peace and stability in your life. But these characters do not have it. The inhabitants of the kitchen have no peace, because even though they cut off utilities, even though they stop deliveries from going there, even though they're trying to starve these people out and what they're doing is inhumane, that is not enough. The police decide to raid them every few days. And these raids are violent, these raids are brutal. They're pulling people out of their homes, they're beating them, they're even killing some of them. The residents have to barricade themselves in their apartment units just to stay home, just to survive. Not only are they not getting food, they have to create their own communities. They have to self-sustain. They're doing all of this, and on top of that, they're being persecuted by the very government that's supposed to be helping them. What's even more troubling and what's even more disturbing about this is that this is not even happening in a far off dystopian future for real. This is currently happening now in modern times where we live now, with the cost of housing, with gentrification, with corporations buying all these homes and raising the prices, and essentially we as a society are losing the power of ownership, losing the power of home, because we don't have the resources, because they keep on raising the price, the values keep going up, the economy is churning and churning, and it's squeezing regular people who just want a place to rest their head, raise their kids, and provide for their families. They're giving them nowhere else to turn, and that begets gang violence, and that begets gangs, and gangs beget violence, and that starts a whole cycle, and that cycle keeps repeating itself. No matter where you relocate the people, as long as they don't have resources, as long as they don't have their needs met, they can't be their best selves. Izzy cannot be the father that Benji needs until he can provide the life that Benji requires. And because he can't do that, we see Izzy constantly leaving Benji behind, constantly abandoning his son, doesn't know how to show up for him, and doesn't know how to express that. So instead of doing that, he leaves. It isn't until the end of the movie when he moves out of the kitchen completely and goes into his new gentrified apartment, and it's completely soulless, it's completely dead, and he realizes there's no life, there's no love, there's no family. He has a son, and his son needs him. Not only does his son need him, the kitchen is under attack constantly. His son doesn't know what life is. If he's not there for Benji, it's going to keep happening. Benji's just going to repeat the same cycle and keep going. It takes one person to break the cycle, and Izzy going back to the kitchen, living with his son, deciding to raise his son and be there through the tough times. Even though they're tough, even though it's not glamorous, there's life, there's love, and that's all Benji needs, a father to be there for him. But guys, that's just my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this in the comment section below. Did you like this movie? Let me know about it. And what do you think of their performances? I thought all the characters knocked it out of the park. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next, binge on.